You mean you didn't take any pictures of the event? Who's going to believe you it happened? You mean your watch wasn't charged before your workout? Did that even count? I mean, if you aren't going to have some sort of proof so everyone around you knows what you did, then why even bother? Seems like just a waste of time. Hello, listeners, and welcome to another solo episode of the Untethering Shame podcast. I'm your host, Kira Wackett, and today we're talking about the shame-driven pressure to prove our worth by always having something to show for what we do or validating ourselves based on how others respond. The idea that something only happens if we have something to show is one of the biggest ploys for our shame brain to consume us. How about if you did something nice or had a great idea and then it went unnoticed? What did it feel like not to be acknowledged? Did it take away from the feeling of doing X in the first place? Do you keep a running list of everything you do around the house, ready to pull it out at a moment's notice with any disgruntled or frustrated remark your partner might make when you feel dismissed or unseen? Have you ever made a post on social media to ensure others had a particular view of you, knew what you were doing, or to protect your reputation? Let's consider any social justice movement. Did you ever post for your ego? So that you didn't worry what people thought about the work you were doing or what you felt? And that watch example, that was me this morning. If the answer is no, I've never cared about being acknowledged, don't need recognition or celebration, and never feel like my ego is screaming at me to jump into the spotlight. One, I highly doubt that you're being 100% honest with yourself. And if you are, and that's true, then two, amazing. Stop listening to this right now and continue on your way. Or better yet, start a podcast to tell other people to be able to do this same work that you're doing. But my guess is that you're all still here and you're listening because it's impossible not to care what other people think or how we're perceived. Because all of us have an ego. The ego is part of our brain that works to make sure that we're seen. And it works directly with our shame brain if we're not careful, trying to alleviate any threat to our being othered in the world by pushing us into the light at any cost. Now, it's not always obvious. Sometimes it's subtle, like making sure to do something nice when others see you, or naturally happing upon an anecdote that lets others know something that you've done or explains something negative. It may be the thing that drives you to share your workout on social media or ultimately leads you to stop caring about or investing in something because you weren't getting the recognition that you wanted or felt like you deserved. The problem isn't that we care what others think. In community-driven settings, this is important. We consider and factor in the people around us because they are important to us. The problem is that it's gone too far. It's no longer about factoring people in or considering others in the way we show up. It's about making our choices and defining our worth only by how others see us. We live in a world where we associate value with recognition and external validation. The number of followers you have on social media, the public accolades you attain, the performance you perfect guides your sense of self. We're inundated with these messages from the time we're born. I even see it in the way that we talk to Everly. We ask her to show or say something to show others what we can do versus letting her be and letting them happen upon her as she decides to share herself. So let's consider how this is serving us. If we're only good enough if others can attest to what we do, is that genuinely fulfilling? If we need the recognition of others to trust in ourselves, isn't that changing the focus away from who we are and turning it into what we do? And if we're doing good purely to elevate ourselves, is that the kind of work we want in the world? The only way to put the good of the world ahead of our egos and make a real and lasting change is for all of us to exist in a world where we don't constantly fear that we're going to be left behind if we don't get ahead. This is what drives all of the isms in our country and keeps us climbing the ladder, as Sonia Renee Taylor talks about in her book, The Body is Not an Apology. This is what leads all of us to be plagued by and existing in a lens of shame. We feel we're only worthy if fill in the blank, which forces us to prove our worth, often at others' expense and without considering the impact or effect on everyone else. So let's just all agree. You don't need to post or record every time you do something. Like if you're working out, work out for you and don't take it too seriously. It's just a workout. If you choose to share it, you have every right to. Just consider who it's for. You don't need recognition every time you do something nice for people to see that you care. Genuine kindness shows up in everything we do, not just in our dedicated and directed efforts. You matter even if everyone doesn't know what you do or who you are, or if you're not given credit for every thought or idea. Life isn't meant to be lived in a silo, so stop worrying about rising to the top of yours. We're all building off of each other, and trust me, if you have one great idea, you're going to have more. There's no shortage of greatness in anyone unless we allow ourselves to get tripped up in the mess of our shame. And finally, you don't need millions of followers to add value to the world. You don't need everything you do to be accounted for and acknowledged. Be consistent. Show up and do good in the world every day because it's who you want to be and is reflected in what you do. So as you think about this and how you can make these shifts moving forward, I want you to remember that your ego is a part of you. That drive to be noticed is always going to exist within you. I'm not asking you to get rid of that because that's an unmovable object. As one of my old therapists used to say, it's time for us to remember that when we're expending all of our energy on the things we can't move, we don't have the capacity to do anything about the things we actually can. So instead, let's rework your relationship with your ego and let it inform rather than guide you in your life. So here are 5 things that you can start doing now to begin to make this shift. First, notice where and with who you seem to desire the most recognition. Is it at home, with your partner, at work? The desire for recognition is inversely correlated to our sense of safety and security in that given role and relationship. 2, recognize what a you problem is. Doing something nice and then not getting recognition is a you problem. You're the one upset about it. You're the one feeling threatened without it. And this feeling is what gets projected onto others. If you did it for the recognition, then this is on you to work through your shame and codependence. If you feel angry, mad, hurt, etc. about the lack of acknowledgement, you're focusing on the wrong side. Why did you do it? Was it in line with your values? Did you do it because it was important to you? Then let that be what fills you up. No one owes you anything because you did X. If you helped out on a project, they're not on the hook to help you. If you did something nice for someone on their birthday and they forgot yours, that's okay. Let it go. 3, shift from seeing the self as content to the self in context. Now, I made a video on this, which I'll make sure to put a link to in the show notes. But for now, the idea of self as content focuses on what we do. It's about boiling down everything into a bullet point list or trying to capture it all on basically a CV submitted for the position of being good enough. Self in context, on the other hand, is about seeing yourself in the overall context of your life. It's about aligning with your values and considering how what we do is a reflection of who we are and the ways we want to show up for ourselves and for the world. It makes space to consider when we're exhausted or burnt out and pivots our expectations and TME, time, money, and energy investments in ways that support rather than deplete us. The pursuit of celebration is about accumulating bullet points. Let that go. Doing the dishes was important because you want your family to live in a clean home and it feels better to be in a clean space. That contribution was significant regardless of how many people thanked you for doing it. 4, validate the feeling and let it go. You get to feel frustrated, hurt, sad, disappointed, longing, whatever you feel, you have the right to it. So feel it fully, make space for it, then let it go. Journal, meditate, take a walk, breathe into it. Whatever you want or need to do to let it go, do it. I like to use a technique called cognitive diffusion, which I also made a video for and will include in the show notes. Choosing to hold on to it only guarantees that you're going to get stuck there, and the person who suffers in that is you, not anyone else. And finally, number 5, actively participate in activities without sharing them. I've made it a habit, unintentionally, of working out without my watch because I've stopped putting so much emphasis on needing to record everything I do. Sure, I like to track my activity. Is it beneficial, especially after Ev was born, to see my progression and postpartum rehab? Yes. But suddenly the data at one point became more of a pressured obsession. I wanted to close my rings every day or be sure to check certain boxes to get a perfect record. Why? For who? And how is that sustainable? This has happened to me in other ways too, such as recounting to Jordan everything I've done in a day to clean up the house, or making sure he knows just how hard a night was with Everly and the mess to clean up after a tough night. It's valid I want to share hard things with him, but again, asking myself for what purpose. Focusing on the want for him to acknowledge my night was hard is, one, setting me up to need that validation to feel okay, and two, is not at all considering the night he had or how it might make him feel that he couldn't be here to help me or be with Ev. And three, it creates a separation between us. We call it the me versus you mentality. Instead, I've been working on doing activities without tracking them on my watch or without telling everybody about them. I'm trying to do nice things and not tell people, even now where the urge is high and the examples could be helpful right now. There's a saying, do good and forget about it. For me, I'm taking that into all accounts of my life. Do good, be true to who I want to be, and trust that I have worth and value even when I live in a world that makes me doubt it without proof, or in those spaces and places where everything feels hard and it feels like it's only valid if somebody else says so. I have every right to label something as hard and not need anyone else to validate it for it to be hard. All right, as we begin to wrap for the day, I want you to make some space to reflect on what's coming up for you and what we're talking about here. So one, what came up for you in this episode? Is anything surprising you? Where do you find yourself pushed most by your ego? And which one of these ideas or next step stands out most? How can you begin to bring this more into your daily life? Now, I would love to hear what's coming up for you, so make sure that you check out the Q&A, fill out the poll, send me a voice memo, or drop me an email so that I can continue to learn and support each of you as we build up this community. If you found today's episode valuable and insightful, I encourage you to leave a review, hit that 5-star button, and of course, share this episode with someone you think could benefit from hearing it. Thank you for tuning in today, and remember, change takes time, but every step counts. So stay the course, stay hopeful, and stay committed to your well-being. We'll be back with more insightful discussions to support you on your journey. Until then, take care, and we'll catch you next Sunday.